nobody's perfect, right? If you're going to be in a culture where development is a part of it, where you're raising up people from within, almost all of our staff, all of our elders were raised up from within. We didn't hire them from outside, using the metaphor of a high school coach for a college coach that we talked about earlier, diamond in the rough. We raise them up here, which means that giving people a chance to play and coaching is what leads to getting better. And even if you're an NFL quarterback, we're in football season, right? If you stop learning and growing, that becomes your lid. And if you're a coach or a leader on a team, that lid becomes the lid for your whole team. And I don't want to be the leadership lid. I want God to determine how big something gets or how small it is, but it's not built around my arrogance or my pride or my shortcomings. It's built around the size and the scope of the mission as God determines it, not based on my sinfulness or arrogance, which God will work in spite of.
Right.
But I don't want that to be the reason why we as a team falter or stall.
Welcome back to the Church as a Team Sport podcast. My name is Lance Wigton. I'm the communications director here at Real Life Ministries. And again, I'm with Jim Putman, senior pastor of Real Life Ministries and author of Church as a Team Sport. We're kind of grinding this podcast to a close here, last couple of episodes. And as we're doing that, Jim, one of the things I wanted to talk about today is assuming that you are working on the relationships with the people in the church, finding leaders, developing them, giving them a place to play, the church is going to grow. The issue with that for the leader is as the church numbers grow, the complexity of the church changes. I don't want to say it's more difficult, but it's different. And that continues between 300, 500, 1,000. And of course, this is something that you and I have both experienced. So the question is basically, how does the coach, you, continually get game film on how you're actually doing and getting an accurate self-assessment so that you can challenge your leadership lid, because everybody has a leadership lid. How do you get feedback on that, and how do you grow and push through that?
Yeah, there's a couple of questions, or a couple of things that you assumed there that I want to pull out real quick. First, we've talked about that our job is to be a coach, and success is discipling everyone. Everyone's a disciple. Everyone can be a disciple, but out of that, some have the gift of leadership, and the job of a coach is to be able to see, not just play the game, working on their own game, but seeing, have the time and space to be able to see the gifts of the people around them, and to also know themselves. What are my weak points? God's used me and filled me into this point. Now, as it grows, I believe God is bringing other people to help me continue to grow. If I get stagnant, I become the leadership lid. If I allow my holes to dictate, then there's weaknesses on the team, and God wants to fill me in as a part of the body with other gifts and other abilities that fill in my holes. It doesn't mean I get to go, that's my hole, I don't have to fix it. Yeah, I'll grow in it. Like with administration, I wouldn't say that's my number one gift, but I needed to grow in it, my understanding of it. But I also needed to identify God was bringing somebody in to fill in that spot, to help me in that, so that the team, we're not an A player, I'm not an A player, we're an A team. There are different people with different positions. They have a leadership skill set, and they have the leanings to fill in where I limp, sort of a thing. Everybody walks with a limp.
Right.
And so what I'm doing then is going, all right, I have to be self-aware of my own weaknesses, looking for people to fill into those weaknesses. I'm not threatened by that, although some of their strengths are irritating to me because it's a weakness. of mine, and they focus on something I wouldn't want to focus on, and they push on things that I wouldn't want to do or even want to care about, but God brought them to fill that area in. So I want them to see it that way so they fill in my holes, but it's also not easy because we're so different. So as I continue to grow myself, being aware, understanding my role is to lift people up, discipling everyone, looking for the leaders. Now I have to have this sort of coaching mindset culture. And I have to figure out, how do I, as a coach, model that it's okay to be coached so that it becomes a part of the culture to be coached and to coach others so that we all get better. Does that make...
Yeah, I think that does make sense. It brings up another couple of questions. So for one thing, I didn't think about this, when we started, but as we grew, I noticed there was a lot of people early on that guys that felt like they kind of invited themselves into your circle to give you feedback, whether you ask them to or not. And how do you distinguish between the advice that somebody's giving you, because it's basically it's communicating to you from your blind side, so an area that you're not going to absolutely have perfect vision on, and they have an opinion and they're telling you this, but they haven't been around you long enough, and so you essentially, how do you know this is someone that's been brought from God, and how do you know that their opinions are correct when it's hard to see what they're even speaking into. And I'll give a reference to this, which is, David was on the wall and his guys said, "Hey, you don't have to go to the battle anymore. Why don't you just stay here?" And that led to some very difficult things in David's life. So how do you weigh that up when you're hearing things like that?
Well, it's always the discernment to know when is it the enemy chirping at you and when is it God trying to fill you in is pretty important. And a lot of people, you have to move past thin skin. Everybody's job is to affirm me rather than speak into my life. You have to move past that. And you have to be able to go, okay, I want to be coached. I need to be coached. I think about it this way. Every pro athlete, Tiger Woods in his prime still had a golf coach who couldn't see himself.
Right.
Or he couldn't see himself. So that coach's job was to help him. Even though that guy may not have been able to golf, nobody could golf like Tiger. But every athlete, if they're wise, allows people to speak into their life. And the Bible's very clear. A wise man seeks wise counsel. So learning to be coached, even from people that may see it different than you, and even to allow that somebody who may even have a bad heart or be dealing with their own brokenness and they don't even know they have a bad heart.
Right, their own blind spot.
Yeah. God can speak into them. But again, even if they have the right heart, they can speak for the devil. Peter, get thee behind me, Satan. So you have to be confident. You have to be able to go, okay, just because it's said doesn't make it true, but I'm going to test it by the word. And then I've got people that are trustworthy around me to bounce it off of. So there were people that were trying to get into the group and speaking stuff at you all the time, whether it's through a card or they want to have a private meeting to fill you in. They have a voice from the Lord, all those things. To go, just because they speak doesn't make it true. But I do have people close to me that I can bounce it off of. Hey, somebody said this. I don't know how many times I've come to you and said, somebody said this. Do you think that's true?
Well, and it's not just me you're talking to. You're talking to several people. And if everybody is against it, that's not a good sign.
Or they affirm something. Maybe somebody said, I think, Jim, you're wrong about what you said in that message about this. Or maybe because you're being strong in your opinion, you're being arrogant or whatever. And I go, I don't think I'm being arrogant. I think I'm confident that it's true, but maybe I am. So I would talk to you. I would talk to Brandon. I would talk to, my lead guys, the elders. I would go to them and go, hey guys, does this sound right? I would talk to my dad, and they would go, you know what? I think you ought to pray about that. I think that could be true. And it's like, okay, right? So I'm going to confirm it by 2 or 3 witnesses, right? And first of all, I want to go, okay, rather than being defensive, I want to create a culture where it's okay for people to share their views. So I get to hear them. Mm-hmm. What is that person's view? What is their attitude? Rather than getting defensive and shutting people down, to go, you know what? I'm going to pray about what you said. I just want you to know how much I appreciate that you had the guts to come and tell me. Mm-hmm. Right? I don't know if I agree yet, but you had the guts to come and tell me. You didn't do it some other way, right? And there are times where people would come in and they'd press my buttons, mm-hmm. and they'd be saying stuff that's making me angry or attacking, or maybe I wasn't in a good place at that time. Mm-hmm. I wasn't in a confident place, and I could get defensive. And when I would do that, I have to come back and go, okay, is this the voice of the Lord? Is this the voice of the enemy? Am I in a good place? There are times where I have a counselor that I would go, and if I'm getting down or whatever, and I want people, because if I'm not healthy, mm-hmm. then I'm not going to create a healthy environment. Mm-hmm. And there are times where I haven't been healthy. There's times when you've called me on stuff. Hey, the way you came in was too hot, mm-hmm. or you didn't listen. You're not listening. Mm-hmm. To create a culture where it's not just about whether you preach well or the songs were right or whatever. It's about the attitude and the heart of the person who comes to you with a heart to protect you and to protect the church, and they may even be wrong. But
right.
But here's how this all applies to this coaching sort of mindset. Mm-hmm. To create a culture where you are setting the tone that you have people speaking into your life. That's why we have the sermon club. That's why I have somebody, I have a pre-preach with our folks that speak into it. Mm-hmm. Then after our first service on Thursday nights, we debrief it. Where did I miss? So when I invite somebody to preach, they know I go through this sort of regiment of mm-hmm. pre-preaching, of creating the sermon together, even debriefing how it went. So they know that they're not just going to be affirmed. Mm-hmm. Just because you're speaking or leading doesn't mean that I've got all this confidence and you're already excellent and you don't need, no. We are in an environment where we can coach one another. And if I can be coached, so can you. And if you don't want to be coached, then I don't care. Nobody's perfect, right? Mm-hmm. If you're going to be in a culture where development is a part of it, where you're raising up people from within, almost all of our staff, all of our elders were raised up from within. We mm-hmm. didn't hire them from outside, using the metaphor of a high school coach for a college coach that we talked about earlier, mm-hmm. diamond in the rough. We raise them up here, which means that giving people a chance to play and coaching is what leads to getting better. And even if you're an NFL quarterback, we're in football season, right? If you stop learning and growing, that becomes your lid. Mm-hmm. And if you're a coach or a leader on a team, that lid becomes the lid for your whole team. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to be the leadership lid. I want God to determine how big something gets or how small it is, but it's not built around my arrogance or my pride or my shortcomings. Mm-hmm. It's built around the size and the scope of the mission as God determines it, not based on my sinfulness or arrogance, which God will work in spite of.
Right.
But I don't want that to be the reason why we as a team falter or stall.
Before I ask the next question, you brought up something that I thought was a great point, which was, we talk about church is a team sport. There's the parallels between sport. If you've got somebody that's saying, hey, I don't agree with your performance, or there is something wrong with what you're doing, but you said you go to your counselor sometimes. There is the potential that you could be performing all right, but the problem is you're injured. In this situation, you would be in a bad place mentally or physically now at our advanced ages. But that's a separate topic that needs to be taken care of, and therefore you have to filter some of the information that you're getting because it's not pure coaching. It's time for you to go on the IR for a while or get some physical therapy so you can get back out on the field.
There are times where you've had some traumatic experience. And if you're leading with the team, it means that there's other people that can step in and play. The devil will convince you that you have to play. It can't work without you. If that's true, then it's too much you and not enough Jesus and the team. You'll have people using the David experience that are supposed to be your friends that are saying, you don't need to come down here and fight with us. Go sit on the wall, right? And you don't know whether to believe that or not. But there are times where, you need to be with it where everybody else is at. And you need to stay in here and hang in there. But there are times where you're not too important to be at the war. That's what they were saying. But you are hurting and struggling. So now we need to get you healthy. While that's happening, the team that you've created can step into that gap. The God can work through other people. God's the hero story. You're not. The devil will run you out there till you die. Or he'll tell you you're too important to go out there. And, so there's all these voices that you have to discern. So you have people that are filling in the gaps in your leadership. Like if it's administration, you need somebody who is an administrator. But then you've got people that aren't really, it's not about just your gaps in your leadership skill. It can be a gap in your emotional and spiritual health that you need to step back and work on that because it's not just about what you can do. It's about who you are as a person. And out of the overflow of the heart, the mouth speaks. Like a whitewashed tomb or a cup filled with filth. Jesus says, clean the inside of the cup. Abiding in Christ, there's a capacity to learn skill sets, to preach better, or I know people who don't preach very well, but their hearts are gold. They could learn to preach better if they actually had an environment where they allowed people to speak into that, and you had people that were coming alongside to give honest feedback. There has to be a place where there is honest feedback, and Christians are so bad at giving it and accepting it. They think, well, I'll just keep my mouth shut. And because I'll just be polite and I won't say hard things. Well, love sometimes says hard things. Or I'm going to be a truth teller and tell you the truth, and I'm not going to be filled with grace and truth, just truth, And so then it becomes vindictive or angry. But how do we create a culture where we do this together as a team? And, in a culture of coaching, to create, I need feedback. Even as a leader, I need feedback about how I'm doing from those below me on the org chart. I need to care for them. Now, that doesn't mean they're always right, because they're not sometimes. They could be broken too. But do you have an environment where we can be open and honest and talk about those things? It's super important.
Okay, so now I'd like to talk about making changes. And, people will say, we'll tell you something, and then sometimes that's a challenge for you. That's something you want to do, or something you don't want to do, and sometimes, well, it's complicated. Let me give you an example. If you had somebody that was another megachurch pastor, and they had kind of more of a CEO model where they worked in a bunker and worked in their
hid away in their office, and
that's right,
worked on their sermon or strategic plans, and weren't disciple making and
didn't meet with
relationship,
people,
all that, right?
Much less the staff, not meeting with the end user. Now, that CEO model, which works for some people, if he came up here and said to you, Jim, I looked at your calendar. Here's your problem. You're meeting with too many. You're meeting with too many people you don't even need to be meeting with. You should just focus on your sermon and go. That would be something that would be a challenge for you to do, and it would be uncomfortable. But you would reject that.
Yeah, I would reject that for biblical reasons.
Oh, okay.
I would reject that because, first of all, we're a disciple-making church, and I can't ask other people to do something I'm not willing to do. I can't ask people to be in relationship, coach, share their burdens, pastor, shepherd people, create a shepherding culture if I'm not going to lead the way. If I'm not going to go, well, my gifts are here and that's all I'm going to do. I just can't ask people to get out of their comfort zone and do things that I'm not willing to do. Jesus said, you tie burdens on people's back that you yourself won't lift a finger to help carry. And Ezekiel 34 plays a huge part. I curse the shepherds of Israel because they do not chase the strays. They do not bind up the hurting. They do not feed the sheep, right? They only take care of themselves. Mm-hmm. Now, let's say I'm a high-level shepherd, but I do need strategic help. Mm-hmm. Well, I need to get better at strategy, but I also need to bring in somebody who on my staff that thinks strategy, and now we can have both things. Mm-hmm. Let's say I'm really good at strategy. I'm not great. Shepherding is harder for me. I'm going to shepherd because I'm called to shepherd my small group, people on my staff as best I can. I'm going to do that. I'm going to learn to do that. I'm going to grow in the fruit of the Spirit because all the fruit of the Spirit are relational. So you can't say you can't be better at relationship. Mm-hmm. The Holy Spirit's going to help you be better at it. You need to be. But if that's not my strength, then I'm going to bring in a shepherd that has a shepherd's heart. I'm going to have to help him understand there is strategy because a shepherd is all about running to the hurting people and caring, and they can get so sucked into that they don't think strategically. And with mass numbers of people, you can't shepherd every single person. No. So you have to create a culture of shepherding. So you have to have a leadership understanding of that role if you're going to be at a high level of staff. But that's what I mean by knowing your own skill sets, getting better at your weaknesses, but bringing in people who fill in those things, and we work together to create a leadership structure where all those things are happening.
Mm-hmm. And so it isn't just about your comfort level. So therefore, like if it's uncomfortable, this must be something I should do. It's the comfort or uncomfort isn't the question. The question is there a biblical principle behind it?
Yeah.
And if there is, then it doesn't matter whether you're comfortable or uncomfortable.
Right. If you have a CEO model, the way I hear that is you have an elder board that acts more like they renew your contract, they let you run the whole church, and so you're running the whole thing, and the only time they'll step in is if there's a problem.
Mm-hmm. Board of directors kind of thing.
And they may not even live in that area, right? In our model, if I have a board, they're all disciple-making, shepherding, caring. They're not just business deciders because they're good at business. Mm-hmm. And they're not hands-off unless there's a problem. They were brought on to be a part of this. There's a plurality of elders, and I'm not just in my office telling my staff what to do, hiring and firing and setting strategic. No, I mean we're not in a business. We're not an organization. Although there's organization, God's a God of order. We're a church family. We're a body, and so while there's some things that I may learn from a CEO about, like I didn't know anything about hiring, and the church. There is a hiring organizational, but we're not a business first. We're a family first. So how do I keep the biblical things first? I can learn some things from business, but I'm not going to take our cues from business.
Mm-hmm. And that you made a great point about the elders. If the elders aren't going to let you steer in a CEO model when they themselves don't agree with that, and they are people that are getting their hands dirty. So why would they
let me? Yeah,
absolutely. That's a great point. We've seen the church grow, and one thing that we didn't know what we knew or didn't know is the complexity as the church grows. It's amazing. What you did that worked at 500 doesn't work when you're at 1,000. And in fact, you have to change the way you do a lot of things. Not necessarily your mission, not your vision, not are we aligning with making disciples? None of that, but the way that's done organizationally changes a ton. Therefore, the roles of the people around you also have to change. A lot of what they're able to do and what they're supposed to be doing. The question is how do you, I've been asking you questions about how do you coach yourself and how do you make changes? Now, the question is, you've had some people that potentially have been around from the beginning and have made those changes through the growth. Now we're up to another growth ring, and now some of the people's talents, their leadership's lids are being exposed. So the first question is, how do you evaluate that? And then the second thing is, if there needs to be a change, how do you handle that? It's a big one.
It's a big one. There's a lot to that. You're right. There was. We've always had some biblical principles, and we've always had a mission and vision. As it grows, you're assessing: are we accomplishing that vision and mission? Mm-hmm. And there's a support structure, a way, people in job roles and responsibilities that support whether or not you can accomplish those goals. When you start to see accomplishing those goals wane, now you go, all right, what are the principles that have to be intact, but now what structures do we need to support that? And so that might mean we go to, we start with a community pastor and we have 8 groups, Brandon, right? Now Brandon now has 25 groups. What he was doing with 8 groups doesn't work with 25 groups. He has to change the way he does things. He had to bring on coaches, right? Volunteer coaches who helped do some of the work that he was doing for all of the 8 groups that he could do. He can't do everything the same way for the 25, but the same things have to be done. Okay, if you're going to fulfill all those principles. Well, now you're at 100 groups. Well, one person can't do that. Now there's 2. Okay, and or 3. All right, so now the org structure changes. Now, maybe you've got a guy. You have to scale how much you. Like we used to say, we want 1 staff for every 100. Well, you can't scale that financially when you get up to 1 per 100 at 2,000. The finances don't. So now you have to go, well, we're not going to hire it done. We have to use volunteers. But let's say I've got a guy who can work with 10 leaders, but his capability, we'll coach him to try to help him make it to 20 leaders. But let's say he can't make it to 20 leaders. It's just not a skill set that he has, and he's not good at it.
It's not a want-to problem.
Jesus talked about the one with the talent, the 2 talents, the 5 talents. You got to have a 5-talent guy, but you've got a 2-talent guy. Now, what you have to do is go, okay, this isn't just about a job. You're part of a family. All right. So how do we love you and help you understand that this doesn't mean that you can't be on the team. It's just you're not in the same role on the team. Now, the devil will play all kinds of games in that. Because if let's say you lose the job part of it, I can't pay you at this point to do because you're 2 talent. I can't pay you what I would pay a 5-talent guy, or I can't afford to pay you and him. These are all decisions that you have to make. And it doesn't always go well, right? They have to know they're loved. They have to know that they're still part of the team. They have to know that, that this can't be the role they're in because I have to care about you, but I have to care about all the other people too, right? And so hard decisions have to be made. You have to do it in a loving way. Over the years, we've moved people in different roles, but sometimes that didn't come with pay. Sometimes they went off staff for a while, but later on we were to move them in a different role. And we had a place for them to play over here where they were paid, and we would move them, but sometimes we didn't. And so what you have to do is you have to go, all right, I'm going to love you no matter what. There are times where I've said, I can't pay you for a job, but as you transition, we're going to help you as a brother or sister. I'll go sell something personally to help pay you so you can find a different job. Now, sometimes the devil plays with this, and there's bitterness and there's anger, and they don't agree, and
person's pride is tied to their position.
There's just a lot to it, and that could be a very painful experience. And that's why you want to make sure they're super mature in Christ and their identities in Christ, not in their job. And if you're discipling people well, that makes this, and you put a mature person into a leadership role, they can understand that, and it hurts, but they make it through it. Sometimes you find out you elevated somebody that wasn't mature, or they were, but they're not right now in this position. And so this is where you fight for a relationship, but it doesn't always end well. So I'm not promising that. You can do your part as well as you can. They have to choose theirs, what their part is. And so that's been hard over the years. But if you don't make the shifts that you have to make, it does impact, it becomes a leadership lid. If you allow someone not to do their job well, it puts pressure on the other people. It can put pressure on their home. If they're feeling the pressure and now they're struggling in their marriage, there are people I've had to say, hey, you're being able to do this, but you're impacting the rest of your life, and this isn't healthy because you're being stretched too far outside of your zone here. So I need you to move back into a volunteer role instead of a paid role so that you get a job that you can do and it's effective and it's not messing up all the other spheres of your life. So these are all considerations that you have to, and the more relationship you have and the more mature that they are, the more you can get through those times, but it's not easy.
Now, you're looking at things, you're making assessments on your own, and you do that because you're a coach and that's part of your role. How do you make sure that what you're seeing about that other person's performance is accurate?
Yeah. Here's the deal. I don't have anybody who lies on my team, but I do have people that don't see the truth.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and that happens to me. That happens to everybody. There are times where I report to the elders what's true. From my perspective, it doesn't make it true.
Right. I mean, we all have biases. We all have backgrounds.
So one of the things that I believe in is, in sports, it's easy. You put somebody on a sports field and you watch them. Right? You watch them, you can see them. When I put somebody in a leadership role and they're working with volunteers or other staff, I can't see their performance because if I come in the room, that changes how it works, right? So how do their meetings go? How do their times with their volunteer, how do their coaching times go? When I ask them about that, they're going to tell me what they think is true, but that doesn't make it the truth.
Yeah, I was brilliant, or I
was terrible.
Yeah.
I think about one of my sons was in wrestling, and I'm a wrestling guy, and he comes about a week and going, my practices are terrible. I'm just stinking right now, and I'm like, wow. Well, I'm gonna come and watch, and I'm watching the practice, and man, I'm just thinking he's doing great, right? He's working hard. He's doing the things that really matter. And after the practice, I go, well, how'd you think it went? He goes, oh, it was terrible. I was terrible today. And I'm like, okay. No, you weren't. You're not seeing accurate. Then I've had times where I'd go and watch my son practice, or I'd hear about, oh, it's amazing. I'm just tearing things up. I'm just doing great. I'd go watch, and I'm like, okay. None of us see the truth all the time, but we can't see it. So what I have here is this policy that I'm going to go and have meetings with people below my executive team, and they have to be okay with that, right? What they need to know is I'm going to go and say, how's the meeting? Oh, well, I'm really struggling. Okay, well, tell me about that. Because what about the leadership are you struggling with? And I want honest feedback, not so I can fire the guy, but so I can coach the guy. And then if they're having a problem, I'll say, I need you to have that conversation with him. You have 1 week. And I'll ask, have you had this conversation? Well, I don't think he wants to hear it. No, that's not how it works here. You need to be kind. You need to be considerate, right? By the same token, my E-team guys can't see what's going on from my community pastors with their volunteer coaches. And so we have to find out how you're really doing so we can coach you, which means you have to have a culture, going back to even Sermon Club. I get coached. You're going to get coached. I get feedback from my sermons from people in there go, yeah, that wasn't clear, or that wasn't, or you just seemed angry or whatever. I get feedback. You just have to go through the right steps. Now, if somebody wants to come to my office and report on something, versus me seeking it out, I'll go, okay, have you talked to him? Have you shared this with him? If you're going around him I'm not going to hear this till you go and do that. Well, what if he fires me? No, they don't get to. Around here, the policy is if you'll share it with them and they don't agree, you tell them you're going to bring it to a third party so that we can hear this together. Right. But creating a culturing, rather than just do what I say, affirm me, I'm going to tell you, but you don't get to tell me. That reeks of lording it over people. That reeks of business world, CEO's disease, lack of input, a lack of sharing. Now, there's an org structure and a chain of command. You have to go through, and even on our team, like the E team, it works like this. If the E team disagrees with maybe an attitude I'm having or a decision I make, they have to share it with me. As an individual, maybe the group as a whole disagrees with me. If they do that, and we don't agree, the policy is they get to bring this to the elders. They can't go around me to the elders. They get to bring it to the elders once they've done it. They've only done it twice in 25 years, but they've done it. One time the elders agreed with them. Was I okay with that? Do I want what's right or do I want what I want? Do I believe that God actually brought people on our team to bring their wisdom or just shut up and do what I told them? You see what I'm saying?
I do. And, you've talked about in this podcast several times the benefits of a trickle-down accountability and a willingness for you to be coached, and brings a culture of everyone wanting to be coached and better. And really, that is so important, because otherwise, if you don't have that, then you have people, regardless of where they're at in the church, that are saying, no, I'm bigger than the growth of the church. My leadership lid is more important than what God can do through his church.
They're threatened by somebody maybe taking their role. But success is raising up people who could.
Right.
Why would I be threatened? And now, they may think they can and they can't because they're naive, and certainly that's true. They don't want to know what it's like to be a senior pastor. But success is you have raised up people who are ready to take that next step, and you're not angry about that. You're excited about it. Now, if they're immature enough that they want to try for a coup, or they're unwilling to wait, or all those things, well, now they may have a skill set, and even some abilities, but who they are as a person isn't okay. So we've got to deal with that. But a lot of people want to protect their spot. They want to have everything. They don't want feedback, and they'll take that to their wife too, their kids. Do what I told you. But your kids can actually say some things. Your wife, everybody needs a helpmate. God thinks we men need help in the home. If you aren't going to listen to your wife, if she didn't bring something to the table to fill in, to see what you don't see, you don't understand. She was brought to you for that purpose. That is God's blessing in your life. It's the same with other people. Now, that doesn't mean they're always right, and you need to discern that. But if they're always wrong and you're always right, you got a pride problem, and you will be the leadership lid.
And really, nobody wants to be there. Accountability is so important. In fact, one of our elders helped develop a 360 assessment that we have used over and over again, and you've been able to give that to other people, and then you can get a better idea of what's going on. You could talk about how that's impacted.
Yeah, Jim Harris and one of our elders, and you
and me,
the three of you put together an anonymous 360 assessment, so that we could give it to our executive team for me, to give it to your team for you. We even use this for our elders. The way it works is you give it to your wife, to people that you're leading, and it's anonymous. And then what it does is it sort of rates you in specific areas of leadership. And then now you get an honest feedback of where others see you in your blind spots, or do you have a blind spot? And one of the hardest things is accurate self-assessment. I remember in that assessment, it judged me high in, what was it called? It judged me high in that I was authentic or transparent. I was a transparent leader. It showed me weak in emotional self-control. and high in influence. So here's how it all played out. I'm going to be authentic and transparent about how I'm doing. I thought that was a win, being real who I am. But I'm high in influence, right? So now, what it was doing was I was influencing people towards, struggle when I was struggling, and I thought that was a good thing. But I was impacting the entire staff when I was down. And it's not that I needed to stop being open, but I had to be more careful about being open because I could influence people negatively. And so that was so good to know, okay, I need to be authentic, but I need to be authentic more carefully when and how and with who, because I don't need to spiral our staff and our church into a negative place.
Right.
And so that was so powerful for me to learn that. And we even use this for our eldership training, where we want them to know where they're strong and where they're weak, and we want to see how they respond. Do they get defensive? Do they, wow, I want to grow in that. And then we help them, learn to become a person who sees their blind spots and then works in that area, and then value people's opinion and create a culture where this is happening across the board. So we've used it on our whole staff, our eldership, everywhere else.
Yeah, and it has worked good. And you're just talking about emotional self-control. The issue why I wanted to talk about it in this podcast was your weaknesses as things grow as a person, as the organization gets healthier and bigger. Those weaknesses you have all of a sudden become huge. And you talked about emotional self-control. That's like jerking the wheel. Now, you drive a bicycle, you jerk the wheel, it's not a big thing. You drive a semi down the freeway, you jerk the wheel, and it's a whole nother issue.
Yeah.
And it's really just the same problem. So it just highlights, I think, the importance of this topic, which is being willing to be coached and making changes, and also building a culture that makes it okay for other people around you to do that. Yeah. Jim, I appreciate this conversation. Really good. We do have resources like the 360-degree assessment that you can get. We'd love to know more of your questions, but check us out at jimputman.com.